The marketplace was alive with noise, yet none of it was joyful. Screams, laughter, and cruel bargains echoed in the air. Tall banners hung from broken poles, written in strange alien scripts, advertising the trade of living beings as if they were nothing more than cattle. Cages lined the dusty road, each one packed with frightened faces, young and old, alien and hybrid. The smell of sweat, fear, and smoke filled the air. At the center of the market, a stage had been built from cracked metal sheets. The auctioneer, a thick-scaled alien with 4 arms, slammed his staff against the floor. His voice thundered through the crowd. "Next slave. Bring her out, hurry!" From the shadows, 2 guards dragged a small cage forward. Inside, curled up like a wounded bird, sat the tiniest figure anyone had seen. A girl, barely taller than a child, was pushed onto the stage. Her skin glowed faintly with a silver hue, her hair tangled and dirty. Her wrists were bruised from tight iron cuffs. The crowd erupted in cruel laughter. "She's too small," one alien shouted. "Not even worth feeding," another sneered. "Sell her by the kilo," someone mocked, and the mob howled. The auctioneer smirked, playing along. "A rare creature, yes, but weak. A burden. Who will take this useless one?" He raised his voice louder. "Starting price, 5 credits. The crowd roared with even louder laughter. 5 credits was less than the cost of a cup of water in that market. The guard shoved the girl forward, making her stumble. She tried to stand tall, but her tiny body trembled. Her large eyes scanned the crowd wide with terror, begging for mercy, but none came. "Too expensive," a bidder yelled mockingly. "I'll pay 1 credit just to throw her into my trash pit," another voice jeered. "Better to roast her, might taste like chicken." The girl's lips trembled. She lowered her head, whispering something to herself. No one could hear the words, but it sounded like a prayer. The auctioneer grew impatient. He pounded his staff again. "Come now, surely someone will claim this creature. She eats little, works little, cries much. Who will take her? 1 credit, half a credit." The crowd jeered again, pointing, mocking. To them, this was entertainment. To the girl, it was hell, then silence. From the back of the crowd, a hand rose slowly. Not clawed, not scaled, not alien. A human hand, every eye turned. The human stood tall, his face half-shadowed by the market's flickering lights. His eyes were steady, his jaw set. He said nothing. He only kept his hand raised. The auctioneer blinked in surprise. "Ah, a human? Strange choice, my friend. Do you not see this as worthless stock?" He chuckled nervously, waiting for the man to lower his hand. But the hand did not move. The crowd turned restless. "Is he mad?" Someone hissed. "He could buy a strong worker for the same price." Another argued. "Maybe humans collect freaks," a third laughed cruelly, but the human did not lower his hand. His silence was heavier than their laughter. The auctioneer scratched his scaled chin. "Very well, 1 credit then. Sold to the human." He smacked his staff on the stage. "Guards, release her to him." The guard shoved the girl toward the human, almost throwing her at his feet. She stumbled, landing hard on the ground. Slowly, she looked up. Her eyes met his for the first time. In them, she saw no laughter, no mockery, just calm determination. The human bent down and held out his hand, not to strike, not to pull, but to help her stand. She froze, staring at the open palm. The marketplace around her was still full of cruel laughter, but in that small gesture, the noise faded for a moment. The girl hesitated, then slowly placed her trembling hand into his. He pulled her gently to her feet. The auctioneer waved them away. "Take your prize, human. She is your burden now." The crowd burst into fresh laughter, but the human ignored them. He placed his coat over the girl's shoulders, shielding her small frame from the cold air. Then without a single word, he walked through the crowd. The girl stumbled beside him, weak but clinging to the fabric wrapped around her. She glanced back once at the stage where she had been mocked, then forward at the man who had raised his hand and never put it down. The crowd's laughter followed them, but it no longer mattered. A strange silence surrounded the two as they left the market. For the girl, fear still clung tightly. For the human, something else burned. A quiet fire unshaken by the world's cruelty. And for the first time in her life, the girl wondered if someone had truly chosen her. Not to use, not to mock, but to protect. The marketplace faded behind them, but its cruel laughter still echoed in the girl's ears. Every step away felt heavy, as if chains still clung to her ankles. The human walked ahead, steady and silent, his coat wrapped around her small frame. He didn't look back at the crowd. Didn't answer their taunts, didn't care about the stares of those who whispered about his choice. The girl struggled to keep up. Her legs were thin, weak from long days without food. The cuffs on her wrists rattled softly with each step. She expected him to drag her, to hit her, to treat her like the others had, but he didn't. He simply slowed his pace when she fell behind, letting her catch up. His silence was strange, unlike anything she had ever known. Finally, she dared to whisper, her voice trembling. Why did you take me?" The human didn't answer at first. His eyes were fixed on the narrow streets, scanning the shadows, cautious of hunters or thieves. After a long moment, he said quietly, "Because no one else would." The words confused her. She had been bought before many times. Each master had their reasons. Some wanted a servant, others a toy, a few just wanted something to break. But this man, his answer made no sense. She clutched the coat tighter around her. "You don't know what I am," she said, almost pleading. "I'm worthless. I can't work. I can't fight. I can't even—" Her voice broke and she lowered her head. The human stopped walking. For the first time, he turned fully toward her. His gaze was calm, steady, not the cruel eyes she was used to. He crouched slightly so his face was level with hers. "Then you don't need to," he said simply. Her mouth fell open, but no words came. She didn't know how to answer that. The path grew quieter as they moved further from the market. The air smelled cleaner here, though the streets were still cracked and broken. Strange lights flickered on the walls, powered by half-dead wires. The girl kept glancing around nervously. She had lived in cages so long that the open air felt dangerous, like she could be snatched away at any moment. Her stomach growled softly. She flinched, ashamed, expecting him to strike her for making noise. But instead, the human pulled a small pack from his side. He handed her a piece of dried bread and a flask of water. She froze, staring at them. "For me?" He nodded. "Eat." Her hand shook as she accepted the food. Slowly, she bit into the bread. It was dry, rough, nothing like the meals she had once dreamed of, but it was more than she had been given in days. The water burned her throat as she swallowed too fast, but it was the sweetest thing she had ever tasted. Tears filled her eyes before she realized. She wiped them quickly, ashamed again. But the human said nothing. He only continued walking, letting her eat in silence. As they reached a quieter district, the girl dared to ask another question. "What will you do with me?" Her voice cracked on the last word. She was afraid of the answer. The human paused for a long time, as if considering. Then he said, "Keep you safe." The words were so simple yet so heavy. No one had ever said them to her before. She wanted to believe them, but fear still held her heart tight. She whispered again, almost to herself. "Safe? What does that even mean?" The human glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "You'll learn." They walked on. But behind them, shadows stirred. Two figures in dark cloaks had been watching since the market. Their eyes glowed faintly as they whispered to each other. "That human took her," one hissed. "Her master will not be pleased," the other replied. "We should follow." The girl sensed eyes on her. She gripped the coat tighter, looking around nervously. "They'll come for me," she whispered. "They always do." The human placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Let them," he said, voice calm but firm. "They won't take you." For a moment she almost believed him. Almost. As the night deepened, the two of them reached an old, rusted doorway. The human pressed his hand against a scanner. The lock clicked open. Inside was a small, dimly lit room, barely more than a shelter. A bed, a table, a tiny stove. It was no palace, but to the girl it felt like another world. He gestured for her to sit at the table. She hesitated, unused to being offered a place instead of the floor. Slowly, she obeyed. He placed a small bowl of warm soup in front of her. Her eyes widened. This is for me?" "Yes," he said simply, sitting across from her. The girl trembled, staring at the steam rising from the bowl. No one had ever given her food without expecting something in return. She didn't know if she could trust this, or if it was some new kind of trick. But as she lifted the spoon with shaking hands and tasted the warm broth, a strange feeling rose inside her. For the first time, she wondered if safety was real. And in the shadows outside, the cloaked figures waited. The girl sat at the table, her thin fingers gripping the spoon as if it might vanish from her hands. The bowl of soup steamed gently. filling the small room with a smell she could hardly believe. Warmth, salt, herbs, simple things, yet to her it felt like a feast meant for kings. She lifted the spoon slowly, almost afraid it was a dream. The first sip burned her tongue, but she didn't care. Her eyes watered, not from the heat, but from something deeper. It had been so long since anyone had given her food without laughter, without cruelty, without a command to earn it. The human sat across from her, calm and steady, eating his own meal in silence. He didn't rush her, didn't watch her like a master watching a pet. He simply let her be. She swallowed another spoonful, then whispered softly, "Why? Why are you doing this?" The human looked up. His eyes were serious but not unkind. "Because you're alive," he said simply. The girl blinked, confused. Alive? That is not reason enough. Many are alive. They still suffer. They still die. He leaned back slightly in his chair. Then maybe that's the reason. Too many suffer. Too many die. I couldn't stop all of it. But I could stop yours. Her hands shook as she set the spoon down. She wanted to believe him, but the weight of her past pressed against her chest. Masters had lied before. They had promised safety, then taken everything. She had learned long ago that kindness always came with a price. Her voice was small. "What will you want from me?" The human didn't answer right away. He finished his meal, wiped his hands on a cloth, and stood. Walking to a shelf, he pulled down a small blanket and placed it on the table beside her. "Tonight," he said, "I only want you to sleep without chains." Her breath caught. Sleep without chains? The idea felt impossible. She looked around the small room. There were no cages, no locks on the door, no whips hanging from the wall. Only a narrow bed against the corner and a pile of spare sheets. She stared at him. "You mean I can sleep here?" He nodded, her eyes widened. She almost laughed, but it came out as a choked sound. "But what if I run?" she asked, testing him. The human shrugged. "Then you run, but I don't think you will." The simple confidence in his voice unsettled her more than threats ever had. Masters had always believed she was too weak to escape, too frightened to resist. But this man, he believed something else. She didn't know what to say. So she looked back at the bowl and forced herself to finish the meal. Every sip seemed to melt a piece of the ice that had long frozen her heart. When she was done, the human took the bowl and set it aside. He handed her the blanket. She hugged it close, burying her face in the fabric. It smelled clean, faintly of soap. It smelled nothing like cages. The silence of the room was strange, almost frightening. She could hear her own breathing, her own heartbeat. In cages there was always noise, chains clinking, guards shouting, other slaves crying. Here it was only her and him, but outside danger stirred. The cloaked hunters from the market lingered in the shadows of the street. Their glowing eyes followed the faint light from the human's window. One of them hissed, "He hides her inside." The other clicked his tongue. Her former master will not forgive this insult. "Tomorrow we take her back." Inside, the girl's instincts whispered warnings. She looked toward the door, her body tense. She felt as if sharp eyes watched her from the dark. Fear clung to her chest again. The human noticed her glance. He walked to the door, checked the locks, then pulled a small weapon from his belt and set it on the table. His voice was calm, steady. "No one will touch you tonight. Rest." The girl's lips parted, but no words came. She wrapped herself tighter in the blanket and slowly lay down on the bed. Her body trembled, not from cold, but from something new, something she couldn't name. She closed her eyes. The mattress was thin, the room small, but compared to the hard floor of cages, it was paradise. For the first time in years, she slept without metal around her wrists, and yet, as her breathing slowed, her heart still whispered questions. Why had he chosen her when everyone else had laughed? Why had he raised his hand and never lowered it? She did not know. But as she drifted into uneasy dreams, she clung to the thought that maybe, just maybe, she was safe. Outside, the hunters sharpened their blades. The night was far from over. The first rays of morning light crept through the cracks of the small room. The girl stirred under the blanket, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. No cage, no chains, no shouting guards. Only the soft fabric of the blanket and the faint smell of soup still in the air. Then it came back to her. The human, the meal, the bed. She sat up quickly, heart racing, half expecting it to be a cruel trick. But the human was real. He was there, already awake, sitting by the door with his weapon resting across his knees. "You stayed there all night?" she asked quietly. He nodded. Someone had to keep watch. The words sent a strange warmth through her chest. No one had ever kept watch for her before. No one had ever cared if she was safe. But outside, the hunters were waiting. Two figures stood in the shadows of the broken street, cloaks wrapped tight around them. They watched the door of the human's shelter with cold patience. One hissed, "She is inside. The master will reward us for bringing her back." The other smirked, showing sharp teeth. "The human won't fight. They never do. Soft creatures, easy prey." Inside, the girl ate a little bread the human handed her. She was still weak but stronger than the night before. Still, fear weighed heavy on her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching from the dark. "They will come for me," she whispered suddenly. "They always come." The human looked at her, his voice steady. "Then let them. I won't give you back." Her eyes widened. "But they will hurt you." He didn't answer. He only checked his weapon again, calm as stone. Later, as they stepped outside, the air was colder than before. The girl clung to the coat he had given her, her eyes darting nervously at every shadow. The streets were quiet, too quiet. The laughter and chaos of the market were gone. Only the whisper of wind and the crunch of footsteps followed them. And then, the hunters moved. They stepped from the shadows, blocking the path ahead. Tall, cloaked, their glowing eyes fixed on the girl. The crowd from yesterday wasn't here to laugh this time. It was only silence, danger, and the sharp edge of steel. The girl froze. Her legs shook so badly she almost fell. She whispered, "It's them." They came. The human stepped in front of her, his body shielding her small frame. His voice was calm but firm. "Stay behind me," the taller hunter hissed. "Human, you bought what does not belong to you. Hand her over." The other hunter's hand gripped the hilt of his blade. "Do it quickly and we will let you live." The girl's breath came fast. She tugged at the human's sleeve, whispering desperately, "Please, just give me back. You don't understand, they'll kill you." But he didn't move. His hand tightened on his weapon. "No," he said, voice like iron. "I raised my hand for her. I won't lower it now," the hunters snarled. "Then you will die with her." They lunged. The first blade flashed in the dim light, aiming straight for the human. He sidestepped, blocking with his arm, his weapon firing a short, sharp burst. The sound cracked through the empty street. The hunter roared, staggering back with a burned shoulder. The second came faster, swinging low. The human caught the girl, pulling her aside just as the blade scraped the ground where she had stood. He pushed her behind him again, never breaking his stance. "Run!" she screamed, but he didn't. The fight was brutal, quick. The human was only one man, but his movements were sharp, precise. He blocked, struck, and fired when he had to. The hunters were stronger, faster, but he was steady. He refused to fall. The girl watched, frozen, her hands gripping the coat tight. She had seen many fights before, slaves beaten, rebels crushed. But this was different. He wasn't fighting for glory. He wasn't fighting for himself. He was fighting for her. Finally, one hunter lay bleeding in the dust, groaning in pain. The other hissed in fury, pointing a clawed finger at them. "This isn't over, human. The master will hear of this. You cannot hide her." They vanished into the shadows, retreating, but their threat hung heavy in the air. The girl trembled, staring at the human. He breathed hard but stood tall, his weapon still ready. Slowly he turned to her, his expression calm once more. "You're safe," he said. But she shook her head, tears falling. "No, no one is ever safe. They'll come again. Worse ones, stronger ones." The human crouched down, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. His voice was low but unshaken. "Then let them come. They'll find me waiting." She stared at him, her heart pounding. For the first time, she didn't feel like prey. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she had someone who would never let go. But above them, hidden eyes still watched, and the master of the hunters was already preparing his wrath. The fight had only begun. The air of the city was heavy with tension after the fight. The human knew they could not stay. The girl's former master would send more hunters, stronger ones. And this time they wouldn't stop until she was taken back. He guided her quickly through narrow alleys, keeping his weapon close and his eyes sharp. The girl stumbled beside him, still shaken from the battle. Her mind was full of images of flashing blades and the sound of gunfire. Every shadow felt like another hunter waiting to strike. Where are we going?" she whispered, clutching his coat tightly. Away, he said, his voice firm. Far away. The girl wanted to ask more, but fear kept her silent. She trusted his steps, even though her heart beat wildly. At last, they reached a large metal gate at the edge of the city. Behind it stretched the old landing docks where abandoned ships rusted in silence. The air smelled of oil, smoke, and metal. The girl looked around in awe. She had only ever seen ships from the distance of her cage, like birds flying free while she remained trapped. The human pressed a hand against a hidden panel, and with a hiss a door opened into one of the freighters. Its hull was scratched, its paint faded, but it stood strong. Inside, the lights flickered weakly, casting shadows along the narrow corridor. "This is yours?" she asked, her voice trembling with wonder. "It's ours now," he replied simply. He led her to the cockpit. The seats were old, the controls scratched, but to the girl it was a palace. She touched the glass window, staring at the distant stars that shimmered beyond the city's dome. "Are we going up there?" she whispered. "Yes," he said. "Hold on." The ship groaned as the engines came alive. A deep rumble shook the floor, dust falling from the ceiling. The girl gripped the armrest wide-eyed. She had never flown before. To her, even the ground had been a prison. How could she imagine the sky? The human pulled the levers. The engines roared louder. With a sudden jolt, the freighter lifted from the ground. The city below grew smaller, its cruel marketplace shrinking into nothing but lights and shadows. The girl gasped, pressing her face against the window. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from something she hadn't felt in years, hope. "It's so big," she whispered as the sky turned black and endless. Stars scattered across the void, brighter than she had ever seen. "Is this freedom?" The human glanced at her, his eyes softening. "It's the beginning of it." For a brief moment, the silence of space wrapped around them, peaceful and calm. But it didn't last. Warning lights flashed on the console. The radar beeped sharply. The human's jaw tightened. "They're coming." The girl turned quickly. "Who?" "Hunters," he said. "They found us faster than I thought." Outside the window, lights appeared. Small ships cutting through the darkness, chasing after them like wolves. Their engines flared red, their weapons glowing. The girl's blood ran cold. "They'll catch us." "Not if I can help it," the human replied. He pushed the ship harder. The freighter trembled, metal rattling as it surged forward. The hunters closed in, firing bolts of plasma that streaked past the hull. Sparks flew as one shot grazed the side. The girl screamed, clutching the seat. "We can't fight them!" "We don't need to," he said, eyes locked on the controls. "We just need to get out." He steered sharply, weaving through the scattered debris fields of old wrecked ships floating in orbit. The hunters followed, their weapons lighting up the dark like fireflies. Each blast shook the freighter, but the human's hands were steady. "Hold tight," he shouted. The girl buried her face in the coat, but she could still feel the ship lurching side to side. Her stomach twisted, but she didn't let go of the seat. Somewhere deep inside, she trusted him to hold the line. The human activated the jump drive. The engines screamed louder than before, the whole freighter shaking as if it might break apart. The hunters closed in, their ships almost touching. Then, flash. The freighter vanished into the void, leaving the hunters behind. Silence. The girl lifted her head slowly. Outside the window, stars stretched into streams of light as the ship jumped through space. She stared, her lips parting in awe. We made it?" she asked softly. The human leaned back, exhaling. "For now." The girl's hands trembled as she pressed them against the glass. She had been sold, mocked, caged, hunted, but now she was flying through the stars. She whispered a word she hadn't spoken in years. "Free." The human glanced at her. He didn't speak, but his eyes carried a promise. The journey wasn't over. The hunters would come again. Her former master wouldn't stop. But for the first time, she wasn't facing it alone. As the stars stretched endlessly before them, the girl felt something she thought had died long ago. Hope that tomorrow could be different. And in the shadows of the galaxy, powerful enemies began to move, anger burning in their hearts. The chase was only beginning. The stars drifted outside the freighter's window, endless and bright. The girl sat pressed against the glass, her small hands leaving faint prints as she stared at the universe. She had never imagined seeing so much freedom at once. Yet even as wonder filled her eyes, fear still lived in her heart. The human sat at the controls, his posture calm but alert. He had not spoken much since they escaped the hunters. His eyes scanned the monitors, ready for danger. The silence between them grew heavy, broken only by the soft hum of the engines. Finally, the girl spoke. Her voice was quiet, hesitant. "You don't know what I am, do you?" The human glanced at her. "You're a person," he said simply. She shook her head. "No, I'm not like others." "That's why no one wanted me." The human didn't answer. He waited, letting her continue. Her hands tightened into fists. "My kind, we were made, not born. Long ago, scientists built us as tools. Miniature bodies, easy to control, easy to trade. We were meant to be weak, to be harmless. That's why they laugh at us. That's why we're sold cheap like broken machines." Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. "But there is something else. Something they don't want anyone to know. Some of us carry abilities hidden deep inside. Powers we can't control. Powers they fear." The human leaned forward slightly. "Powers?" She nodded slowly. Her eyes shimmered faintly in the dim light. "I don't know what mine are. I only know they called me dangerous once. They tried to erase it, but they couldn't. So instead they sold me cheap, hoping I'd disappear." Her breath shook as she whispered, "That's why they want me back. Not because I'm worthless, but because I'm not." The human's expression didn't change, but his silence was heavy. She searched his face, waiting for the disgust, the fear, the rejection she had always seen before. At last, she whispered, "Will you still keep me, if I am dangerous?" For a long moment, the hum of the engines was the only sound. Then the human turned fully toward her. His gaze was steady, his words calm. "I raised my hand once," he said. "I won't ever put it down." Her heart stopped. She stared at him, unable to speak. The simple words cut deeper than any promise. She felt warmth spread through her chest, battling against years of cold. But before she could answer, alarms blared. The radar flashed red. Another ship had locked onto their signal. The hunters were back. The girl froze. "They found us again." The human's hands flew across the controls. "Hold on." The freighter shuddered as enemy fire lit up the dark. Plasma bolts streaked past the hull, one striking hard enough to rattle the entire ship. The girl screamed, gripping the seat. The human swore under his breath, steering hard. The freighter dove through a field of ice debris, chunks of frozen rock spinning around them. The hunters followed close, their weapons glowing. Then something happened. The girl's chest burned. A strange pulse spread through her body like lightning in her veins. Her eyes glowed faintly silver. She clutched the seat, gasping, "What's happening to me?" she cried. The human glanced at her, shock in his eyes. "Your power." The freighter jolted as another blast hit. The girl's panic surged. "They'll kill us," she screamed. Her small hands slammed against the console, and then, light. A burst of silver energy erupted from her body, spreading across the ship like a wave. The enemy fire bent away, scattering into nothing. The hunters' ships veered off course, spinning wildly as if invisible hands had shoved them aside. The girl fell back, trembling, her eyes wide with terror. I didn't mean to." The human caught her before she slid from the seat. His grip was firm, grounding. "You saved us," he said firmly. She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No, this is what they wanted. This is why they call us cursed. I can't control it, I'll hurt you too." But the human's voice was steady, unshaken. "No, you won't, because I trust you." The girl's sobs quieted. His words wrapped around her like a shield stronger than any power. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of herself. The ship steadied. The hunters, damaged and scattered, retreated into the void. For now, they were safe again. The girl wiped her eyes, her body still trembling. She whispered, You should have left me. You should have walked away." The human shook his head. "I don't walk away. Not from you," her heart thudded. She looked at him through blurry eyes. Slowly, carefully, she whispered the words she had never dared to say. "Then maybe I don't want to run anymore." Outside, the stars shimmered brighter, as if they had been waiting for her to finally see them. And deep in the galaxy, her former master clenched his fists. The hunters had failed, but he would not. The girl's hidden power was awake now, and he would stop at nothing to claim it. The galaxy was no longer silent. News had spread. The hunters who failed to capture the girl carried back stories of her awakening power. Whispers reached her former master, and his fury burned across the stars. He sent not 2 hunters this time, but an entire squadron, armed with ships far stronger than the old freighter the human piloted. The girl sat quietly in the cockpit, staring at her trembling hands. She could still feel the echo of the strange silver energy that had burst out of her. She hadn't meant to do it. She didn't even know she could. Yet the memory of it haunted her, because in that moment she hadn't felt weak or worthless. She had felt powerful, and power was what everyone feared. The human placed a hand on her shoulder. She jumped slightly, but he only said, "They're coming. You can feel it too, can't you?" She nodded slowly. Her eyes filled with tears. "When they find us, I might lose control again. I could hurt you." His voice was calm, steady, the same as always. "You won't, I trust you." Those words struck deeper than any chain. She had been mocked, sold, caged, but never trusted. Now, even when danger closed in, he still refused to let go. The radar blared. Red dots filled the screen, enemy ships surrounding them. Plasma fire lit up the void as the squadron locked on. The girl's heart pounded. "There are too many." The human gripped the controls, steering hard. The freighter shuddered as blasts scraped past the hull. Sparks rained from the ceiling, alarms screaming. He didn't flinch. "Then we fight." The hunters' voices echoed over the comms. "Surrender the girl, human. She is property of the master." The human switched the comms off. "You're not property," he said firmly to her. "Not anymore." The ship shook again as another blast struck. The girl cried out, clutching her seat. She could feel the fear rising, the same fear that had lived inside her for years. But behind it, something else stirred, something stronger. Her eyes glowed faintly silver. She shook her head, whispering, "No, I can't." The human reached over, taking her small trembling hand in his. "I raised my hand for you once," he said, voice low but fierce. "And I will never put it down. Do you understand?" Her breath caught. The words burned through the fear like fire through dry wood. She squeezed his hand back. The enemy ships closed in, weapons glowing. The human steered into the heart of them, weaving through the chaos, his focus unbreakable. But the freighter was old, too old to withstand a fight like this. A blast tore across the wing. Warning lights screamed. Smoke filled the cockpit. The girl screamed, "We're going to die." The human shouted back, "Then die fighting free." And then it happened. The silver light returned, brighter, stronger, unstoppable. It poured from her body, filling the cockpit, spilling into the stars outside. The hunters fired, but their bolts dissolved into nothing against the wave of energy. Their ship spun out of control, engines burning out as if invisible hands had crushed them. The girl cried out, not in fear this time, but in release. The power roared through her veins, wild and beautiful. Her eyes shone like twin stars. The human held her hand the whole time, never letting go. His voice cut through the storm. "You're not dangerous. You're alive, and you're free." One by one, the hunters' ships exploded into silence, leaving only drifting wrecks in the endless dark. When the light finally faded, the girl collapsed against her seat, trembling, tears streaming down her face. I didn't hurt you?" The human shook his head. "No, you saved us both." She looked at him through blurry eyes. For the first time, she didn't see chains around her future. She saw stars. Endless stars. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Everyone laughed at me. They said I was worthless. They said I was nothing." The human squeezed her hand tighter. "They were wrong. You were never nothing. You were just waiting for someone to see you." She buried her face in his coat, sobbing softly. And for once, the tears weren't only from pain. Outside, the stars stretched on forever. The hunters were gone, the master's reach broken, for now. There would be more battles, more dangers, but the girl no longer faced them alone. Because one man had raised his hand for her in a cruel market, and he had never lowered it, and he never would.